Introduced the legendary character of Zorro, highlighting his impact on pop culture and hinting at the hidden secrets behind his persona. The Mask of Zorro is one of those quintessential 90s action movies. It's a swashbuckling epic that so many of us grew up with, and it had that perfect mix of romance, revenge, and adventure. Antonio Banderas and Zeta Jones had insane chemistry that just lit up the screen, while Anthony Hopkins brought this legendary weight to his role. The movie just feels like a classic Hollywood adventure, known for its incredible stunts, sharp dialogue, and unforgettable action. It's a huge nostalgia trip, a film that feels like it was always a classic, but the real story is way more chaotic. Behind that flawless choreography and sweeping romance was a production that was constantly on the verge of complete disaster. This beloved 90s masterpiece was almost totally derailed by behind-the-scenes chaos that would make most directors quit. The director actually had to be hospitalized in the middle of the shoot, shutting everything down. A mystery virus tore through the entire crew, leaving them short-staffed and scrambling. And Antonio Banderas, along with his team of stuntmen, performed unbelievably dangerous practical stunts that a studio today would never even think about trying without a green screen. The polished, amazing movie we all love is basically a miracle, and it's all thanks to a cast and crew who went through hell and back to create a legend. So today, we're pulling back the mask to reveal the truth and counting down the 20 weird facts you never knew about the chaotic making of the Mask of Zorro. We're starting with one of the most incredible locations in the movie, Don Rafael Montero's massive gold mine. That gigantic, practical set where the explosive final battle happens looks so huge and detailed that for years, people just assumed it had to be some clever CGI or a miniature. But nope, it was 100% real. And the story behind how they found the spot is pure Hollywood luck. The production team was having a tough time finding the right location in the huge landscapes of Mexico. As the story goes, one of the location scouts got completely lost while searching. Out of frustration, he stumbled into this remote, forgotten area that just happened to be perfect. The director, Martin Campbell, saw the potential right away, and the crew got to work. But building this thing was a huge job. It took a team 4 months, 3 tons of nails, and a mind-blowing 85 tons of lumber to construct the mine from scratch. It was a massive gamble of time and money, all because one guy supposedly took a wrong turn at the right time. That happy accident became the backdrop for one of the best final fights in 90s movies. Every hero is defined by their weapon, and Zorro's sword is iconic. But just getting that sword onto the set turned into a bizarre and frustrating nightmare. As production was getting started, the props department had custom swords made for the film, including the lightweight plastic ones that are essential for safely choreographing fight scenes. These weren't just any props, the actors needed them to start their intense training. But when the props were shipped to Mexico, they hit a snag with customs. Officials impounded the entire shipment, including Zorro's plastic practice sword, and just refused to release them. For 9 agonizing days, the production was basically stuck. The actors were there, the trainers were ready, but the most important tool for a Zorro movie was being held hostage by red tape. You can just imagine the director, Martin Campbell, and the producers making frantic calls, trying to explain why they so desperately needed a box of what were basically plastic toys. It was a huge delay and one of the first signs that making this movie was going to be a battle both on and off the screen. Director Martin Campbell really wanted to shoot as much as possible on real locations to give the film a raw, authentic feel. But that also meant dealing with whatever Mother Nature decided to throw at them. The production chose to film in some pretty remote spots in Mexico, far away from any city comforts. On one really important day, the entire company boarded a bus to check out a key location for a chase scene. As they got deeper into the countryside, the sky just opened up, and it started pouring rain. The dirt roads instantly turned into a pit of thick, impassable mud. And, of course, their bus got hopelessly stuck. This could have been a total disaster, costing them time and money, but it ended up being a moment of inspiration. Stranded in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by this muddy, rain-soaked mess, Campbell decided to lean into it. He looked at their miserable situation and said that this, the mud, the gloomy light, the raw, messy environment, was perfect for the film. He wrote the soggy setting right into the movie, adding a layer of grit and realism that was never in the script. It's a great example of a director turning a potential catastrophe into a creative win. Zorro's black costume is iconic, but in this movie, there isn't just one, there are two, and each one tells its own subtle story. Costume designer Graciela Mazin put a ton of thought into making the Zorro of Don Diego de la Vega different from the Zorro of Alejandro Murrieta. She designed two unique outfits to show the different backgrounds and personalities of the two men. Anthony Hopkins' Zorro, Don Diego, is a Spanish nobleman, and his costume shows it. It has a more traditional, classic Spanish style that's elegant and refined. In contrast, Antonio Banderas' Zorro, Alejandro, is a Mexican-born former bandit. His costume was designed to reflect his roots, with elements of Mexican heritage and a rougher, more practical feel. It's such a clever bit of visual storytelling. Without a single line of dialogue, the costumes tell you about the cultural and personal gap between the two heroes. One represents the old world and its traditions, while the other embodies the new world and its spirit of rebellion. It's a small detail that most people would never notice, but it adds a really rich layer to the film. It is impossible to imagine anyone other than Anthony Hopkins and Antonio Banderas in these roles, but the original casting plan was completely different. For the older Zorro, Don Diego de la Vega, the studio's first choice was James Bond himself, Sean Connery. Connery was actually cast way back in 1994 and would have brought a totally different energy to the part. At the same time, the role of the young, fiery successor, Alejandro, was first offered to Andy Garcia, who was a huge rising star. The studio even thought about Tom Cruise for the part, but he reportedly said no. Just imagine that version of the movie, Sean Connery training a hot-headed Andy Garcia. It would have been a completely different film. But the project got stuck in development hell for years. Directors came and went, and eventually, Connery dropped out, which opened the door for Anthony Hopkins. That one casting change probably altered the entire tone of the movie, turning it from a more standard action flick into the character-driven epic it became with Hopkins's incredible performance. It's one of those great Hollywood, what-if moments. The role of Elena Montero is one of the most memorable female leads of the 90s. Catherine Zeta-Jones' performance made her a global superstar, but she wasn't the first choice for the part. In a wild bit of casting history, the role of Elena was originally offered to a rising music artist, Shakira. At the time, Shakira was already a huge star in Latin music but had almost no acting experience and was still working on her English. The producers saw her star power and thought she had the right look and spirit for Elena. But in the end, Shakira turned the role down. She reportedly felt her English wasn't good enough yet for such a big part and was nervous about making her acting debut in a massive blockbuster. Her decision paved the way for Catherine Zeta-Jones, who executive producer Steven Spielberg had seen in a Titanic miniseries. He recommended her to the director, she did a screen test, and the rest is history. It's crazy to think about how different the film might have been with Shakira, but her turning it down gave us Zeta-Jones' star-making role and let Shakira continue on her path to becoming a music legend. Anthony Hopkins gives a performance that is the absolute soul of this film. But what most people don't know is that he almost rejected the role because of horrible, debilitating back pain. For years, Hopkins had been dealing with a severe back problem that got really bad while he was filming the movie The Edge. The pain was so intense that when he was offered the role of Don Diego de la Vega, a character who needed to be physically capable, even as an older man, he initially said no. The idea of sword fighting and riding horses just seemed impossible. But Hopkins was a huge fan of action movies and really wanted to be part of the Zorro legacy. Just as he was about to give up the opportunity, he had a new kind of laser surgery on his back. The surgery worked. After years of pain, he finally got some relief, and with his health back, he immediately called the producers and took the part. Knowing this adds a whole new layer to his performance. The weariness and physical pain you see in Don Diego wasn't just acting, it was real. Hopkins channeled his own struggle and recovery into the character. Catherine Zeta-Jones' portrayal of Elena was so convincing that it fooled almost everyone. Her accent was perfect, her chemistry with Antonio Banderas was off the charts, and her fiery Spanish persona felt so real that audiences and critics all over the world were sure she was Hispanic. The truth, of course, is that Catherine Zeta-Jones is proudly Welsh. Her total transformation is all thanks to the insane training she went through for the role. She and the other actors were thrown into what they called a Zorro boot camp. This wasn't just a couple of lessons, it was an intense, daily grind. For weeks, her schedule was 2 hours of fencing, an hour of horse riding, 2 hours of dancing, and constant dialect coaching to perfect her accent. She said the whole thing was exhausting but that it gave her the skills and confidence to not just play Elena, but to become her. The hard work paid off so well that it literally rewrote her public image in the minds of millions, proving her star-making turn was no fluke. In today's world of CGI and hypersafe movie sets, the level of realism Antonio Banderas demanded would be almost unheard of. He wasn't just interested in looking the part, he wanted to feel it. He trained for months with the legendary sword master Bob Anderson, who was an Olympic fencer. He practiced swordplay 6 days a week, but the truly shocking part is that he often trained with real, live steel blades, not the blunted props. This was his choice. He believed that using real swords would change how he moved, how he fought, and even the look on his face. He wanted the danger to feel real. This carried over to the actual filming. In the chaotic scene where Zorro fights 10 soldiers at once, the action was so intense that by the end of the day, Banderas's hands were covered in band-aids, with blood running down his fingers from all the nicks and cuts. Director Martin Campbell said, "I don't think he had a finger left." This wasn't about being reckless, it was a deep commitment to making it feel real, and it's a huge reason why those fights are still so thrilling to watch. Antonio Banderas did most of his own stunts, which is a huge part of the film's raw, physical energy. He rode horses at full gallop, swung from ropes, and did incredibly complex sword fights. But there was one specific stunt that the production decided was way too dangerous for their star to even try. It's that spectacular moment where Zorro, standing on top of a galloping horse, jumps over a massive log. The stunt was performed by Tad Griffith, a world champion trick rider. The level of precision needed was insane. Griffith had to ride 2 horses at the perfect speed toward the log. Then, 3 strides out, he had to drop the reins and time his jump perfectly to clear not just the log but also the horses passing right underneath him. There was zero room for error. One tiny miscalculation could have ended in a catastrophic injury. The stunt coordinator and director knew that risking their star on a stunt like that was just not an option. It really says something when, in a film packed with dangerous practical stunts, this was the one moment where the professionals had to step in and say it was just too big of a risk. One of the coolest, most character-defining shots in the whole movie was completely unscripted and came straight from Antonio Banderas himself. It's that iconic moment in the final duel where Zorro angles his sword just right, catches the sunlight, and reflects it straight into Captain Love's eyes, blinding him for a second. A lot of fans thought this was a clever special effect, but it wasn't. During rehearsals, Banderas, totally in character, just came up with the idea on the spot. He suggested it to director Martin Campbell, arguing it was a smart, cunning trick that Zorro would absolutely use, a move that showed his cleverness, not just his sword skill. Campbell loved it, and they decided to try and capture it for real. Incredibly, Banderas nailed it in just 3 takes. He managed to find the exact angle to catch the sun while staying perfectly in the scene. That flash of light wasn't just a cool visual, it was a moment of pure actor-driven genius that became a legendary part of Zorro. We are halfway through our list, and the stories behind this movie just keep getting wilder. If you're enjoying this peek behind the scenes of a 90s classic, do us a favor and hit that like button. And let us know in the comments, what is your absolute favorite Zorro stunt or one-liner? It's always awesome to see what moments stuck with fans. Now, let's get back to the chaos. The pressure of directing a huge blockbuster is insane even on a good day. But for Martin Campbell, the shoot for The Mask of Zorro became a serious threat to his health. Deep into production, as all the problems were piling up, Campbell got really sick. He was diagnosed with bronchitis, a severe respiratory infection that made it impossible for him to work. He was so sick he had to be hospitalized, which brought the entire production to a grinding halt for 4 whole days. On a movie set, a 4-day unscheduled shutdown is an eternity. It costs a fortune and throws the whole schedule into chaos. This wasn't just a small problem. It was a full-blown crisis that put even more pressure on the already strained production. The cast and crew were just left waiting, and the producers at Sony were getting very nervous. It was a clear sign of the physical and mental toll this chaotic shoot was taking on everyone, starting right at the top. As if the director being in the hospital wasn't bad enough, the production got hit with another crisis at the same time, a mysterious virus that spread through the cast and crew like wildfire. According to weekly emails from producer Doug Claiborne, it felt like everyone was getting sick. The illness spread fast, probably through the hotel's ventilation system. At one point, he wrote, "Everyone is sick. A virus is going around like crazy." This wasn't just a case of the sniffles. People were so sick it caused major disruptions. Scenes had to be constantly rearranged or shot with a skeleton crew because so many key people were out. The actor who played Captain Love's right-hand man was sick, and even Antonio Banderas was under the weather for a while. That constant illness and exhaustion created a really tense atmosphere on set. The tension you see in some of the film's big confrontations wasn't always just acting, sometimes it was the result of real, off-screen stress. The production was literally limping along, trying to keep a massive movie on track while dealing with a health crisis, with all the production nightmares, customs delays, bad weather, sickness, the director's hospitalization. It's no surprise that the film's finances started to get out of control. The Mask of Zorro was originally supposed to have a budget of around $65 million. But as the chaotic shoot dragged on, all the delays and problems caused the costs to explode. By the time they finished filming, the budget had ballooned to $95 million. That kind of overspending makes studio executives extremely nervous, and it put a ton of pressure on Martin Campbell to deliver a massive hit. At one point, things got so bad that the new head of the studio, John Calley, called Campbell and told him flat out, "I don't like the project, I don't like the script, and I don't like how much it's costing." The film was turning into a huge financial gamble for Sony Pictures. They were pouring millions more than they ever planned into a project that, from the outside, looked totally cursed. The ending of The Mask of Zorro that we all know, with Alejandro and Elena married with a baby, and the Zorro legacy secure, is the perfect, happy conclusion to the adventure. But that wasn't the original ending. The first version of the film ended on a much more serious and ambiguous note. In the original cut, after the mine is destroyed and the prisoners are freed, Zorro and Elena lead everyone through the desert. Suddenly, they're intercepted by the historical General Santa Anna and his army. There's this tense, quiet standoff between Zorro and the general. Instead of arresting him, Santa Anna just lets Zorro and the people go free. The film would have ended there, with Alejandro and Elena kissing in the desert. But when they showed this version to test audiences, it just didn't work. The director felt it was anticlimactic. So, the studio paid for reshoots to create the happier, more satisfying ending we have now. This one change completely altered the film's final moments, turning it from a more downbeat historical drama into a truly feel-good family adventure. While Zorro is a fictional character, Alejandro Murrieta is a direct nod to a real, legendary Mexican figure named Joaquin Murrieta. The film even makes this connection by naming Alejandro's brother Joaquin. The real Joaquin Murrieta was known as the Robin Hood of El Dorado during the California gold rush in the 1850s. His story is a tragic one. Legend says he was a peaceful gold miner who was driven to a life of crime after American miners committed horrible acts against him and his family. In many versions of the story, his wife was attacked and his brother was falsely accused of theft and hanged. Swearing revenge, Murrieta formed a gang and fought back, becoming a symbol of Mexican resistance. His life story was turned into a novel, which is widely believed to have been the main inspiration for Johnston McCulley when he created the character of Zorro in 1919. The movie cleverly weaves this real-life legend into its story, making its hero the brother of the man who inspired the whole mythology. It creates this cool loop where the fictional Zorro legacy is passed down to the heir of its real-life inspiration. Zorro's influence is huge, and you can see his DNA most clearly in one of the biggest superheroes of all time, Batman. Johnston McCulley's Zorro, created in 1919, basically wrote the playbook for the modern superhero. Think about it. Zorro is a rich nobleman, Don Diego de la Vega, who acts like a useless fop during the day. But at night, he becomes a masked vigilante fighting for the common people. He works out of a secret cave, the Zorro Cave, hidden under his home. He has a signature vehicle, his black horse Tornado, and uses his brain and gadgets just as much as his fighting skills. He even has his own bat signal, the iconic Z he carves everywhere. When Bob Kane and Bill Finger created Batman in 1939, they pulled heavily from this. Bruce Wayne is a millionaire playboy who secretly fights crime from the Batcave under Wayne Manor. The parallels are undeniable. The Mask of Zorro brought this foundational hero to a new generation, reminding everyone of the power of a hero with a secret identity, a hidden lair, and a mission for justice, a template that Zorro created and Batman made famous. One of Zorro's other signature weapons is the Bullhip. But director Martin Campbell was actually against using it. He felt the whip was kind of old-fashioned, maybe even a little goofy, and he didn't want it in the movie at all. But Anthony Hopkins, who always does his homework, completely disagreed. He insisted that the bullwhip was an essential part of the Zorro character and that you simply couldn't have Zorro without it. He was so passionate about it that he started practicing with a bullwhip every single day on set. He was determined to master it himself, so he could handle it with the confidence of the real Zorro. Stuntman Alex Green had a custom-made bullwhip that Hopkins really liked. He practiced with it constantly until he could crack it and perform tricks convincingly on camera. His dedication paid off, and Campbell gave in. The bullwhip stayed. After the movie wrapped, as a sign of respect, Alex Green gave that custom-made whip to Hopkins as a gift. During the exhausting production, executive producer Steven Spielberg paid a visit to the set in Mexico. Watching the massive practical sets, the real horses galloping upstairs, and the raw sword fights, he had a moment of clarity. He pulled Antonio Banderas aside and said something prophetic. Banderas later recounted what Spielberg told him. "This is probably going to be one of the last westerns shot in the way the westerns were shot in the old days, with real scenes and real horses, where everything is real, real sword fighting, no CGI. Everything was practical." Spielberg continued, "But things are going to change. They're going to change and they're gonna change fast. And so you should be proud of this movie." And he was completely right. The Mask of Zorro came out in 1998, right on the edge of the digital revolution. Just a few years later, movies like Lord of the Rings and the Star Wars prequels would make CGI the norm for big action scenes. The kind of dangerous, practical stunt work in Zorro became incredibly rare. The film is like a time capsule, a final, glorious display of old-school filmmaking. Spielberg saw the end of an era coming, and he knew this chaotic, difficult movie was creating something special. The mentor-student relationship between Don Diego and Alejandro is the absolute heart of this movie, and that powerful connection was built in a series of secret, private rehearsals between Anthony Hopkins and Antonio Banderas. Early in the production, Hopkins took Banderas aside, away from all the chaos of the set. In these quiet, one-on-one sessions, they didn't just run lines. Hopkins focused on something deeper, teaching Banderas the art of stillness and control. He taught him that Zorro's power wasn't just in his speed, but in his economy of motion, how he stood, how he listened, and how he could command a room without saying a word.